Welcome to Unspoken AFFIRS. My name is Linda Parker. And never in my life did I imagine I would one day share this part of myself so openly. For years I kept it locked away, telling myself it wasn't worth speaking out loud. That no one would understand, that maybe even I didn't fully understand it. But silence is a heavy weight, and secrets are like shadows. They stretch and grow the longer you try to ignore them. Eventually, they demand to be acknowledged. That is why I'm here, speaking to you now, even though my voice shakes as I remember. Looking back, the story feels almost unreal, like a film I never signed up for. A script written for me without my permission, with twists I never saw coming. Yet, it was my life, my reality, and in some ways, my rebirth. It began on a quiet spring morning in Ohio, in a house where the rhythms of routine had dulled me into forgetting who I used to be. Outside my kitchen window, the yard was alive with early blooms. Daffodils swayed in the breeze, and violets peeked from the edges of the lawn. The air smelled faintly of damp soil and coffee. I was at the counter, cradling a mug between my palms, when Ethan walked in. My son, 22 years old, home from university for the weekend. He had always been different, even as a little boy. Where other children saw puddles, Ethan saw reflections of the sky. Where others noticed clutter, he noticed the way light bent across a surface. He had grown into a photography student who carried his camera everywhere like it was an extension of his soul. That morning he sat across from me, his plate untouched, his eyes thoughtful. Then he said it. "Mom, I need a subject for my new project. Would you let me photograph you?" At first, I laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but the kind that comes from disbelief. Me. I was just a middle-aged woman, a mother, a wife whose days blurred together with work, chores, errands, and obligations. I had long ago stopped seeing myself as anything worth capturing. I tried to brush it off, but Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "That's exactly why I want you," he said. "Real beauty isn't about filters or perfection. It's about honesty. You've lived, Mom. Your face tells a story. I want to capture that." His words stopped me. They reached into a part of me I didn't even know was still there. For so long, I had felt unseen. My husband, Mark, once adored me, once looked at me as though I was the most captivating person in the room. But over the years, that gaze had dimmed. His affection had been replaced with long nights at the office, constant attention to his phone, and silence at the dinner table. I told myself it was normal, that every marriage softened over time. But deep down, I knew something was missing. I missed being noticed. I missed being cherished. And here was my son. Not with romance, not with affection like Mark once gave me, but with an artist's eye reminding me that I still had value, that I was still worth looking at. So I agreed. We cleared the living room together. Sliding the couch aside, pulling back the curtains, sunlight streamed in, soft and golden. Ethan positioned me near the window, camera in hand. "Don't pose," he said gently. "Just be. Close your eyes if you need to. Think of something that makes you feel alive." At first, I was stiff. My smile felt forced, my hands awkward. I laughed nervously at how ridiculous it felt. But Ethan's patience was endless. "Relax," he told me. "It's not about perfection. It's about you." So I tried. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander. Memories, surface memories of the young woman I once was. I remembered running barefoot in the rain as a teenager, the thrill of freedom soaking me to the skin. I remembered all-night reading sessions in college, losing myself in stories bigger than my own. I remembered Mark and I when we first fell in love, laughing until our stomachs hurt. So, sure, the world belonged to us. Slowly, I felt myself soften. I wasn't just a tired wife or a worn-out mother. I was still that girl who dreamed, who laughed, who loved. The shutter clicked again and again. When Ethan finally showed me the photographs, I couldn't breathe. The woman staring back at me was me, but also someone I hadn't seen in decades. Her eyes sparkled, her smile was alive, her presence strong yet gentle. For the first time in years, I recognized myself as more than just the background character in everyone else's lives. Tears blurred my vision. "I didn't know I still looked like that," I whispered. Ethan just smiled and said, That's the real you. Mom, you've been here all along." From that day, something inside me shifted. What started as one photography project grew into a ritual. Each weekend, Ethan came home and we'd set up new sessions. Sometimes indoors with soft lighting. Sometimes outside in the yard where the breeze lifted my hair. Sometimes candid me, cooking, me reading, me just being. With each session, I felt more alive. It wasn't about vanity. It wasn't about trying to look younger. It was about rediscovering the parts of myself I had, buried under years of routine and silence. But with each rediscovery came an ache. Because when the sessions ended and the house grew quiet again, I was left with the reminder of how empty my marriage had become. Mark and I lived under the same roof, but we were miles apart. He barely asked about my day. He didn't notice the glow in my face after Ethan's sessions, or if he did, he said nothing. At night, he scrolled through his phone while I lay beside him, wide awake, wondering how we had grown so far apart. The photographs became a mirror, not just of my face, but of my soul. They showed me a woman still full of life, still capable of joy, still capable of being seen. And once you see yourself again, truly see yourself, it's impossible to go back to invisibility. I began to change in small ways. I started dressing in colors I had long avoided, colors that reminded me of youth. I lingered in the garden longer, letting myself breathe. I picked up books again, novels I had abandoned years ago. Each photograph session was like peeling back a layer of dust from my spirit. And yet with every new layer, the distance between Mark and me grew harder to ignore. I wanted him to see me again. I wanted him to look at me the way Ethan's camera did, with attention, with appreciation. One evening, I tried. I dressed up for dinner, not in anything extravagant, just a simple dress that made me feel beautiful. I cooked his favorite meal. I lit candles, something I hadn't done in years. He came home late, his eyes glued to his phone, and muttered a distracted, "Thanks, honey." He barely looked at me. The candles flickered between us, but they might as well have been oceans that night. As I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself questions I had long avoided. When did we stop seeing each other? When did silence become easier than conversation? When did I stop being enough for him? And yet, through the ache, through the loneliness, the photographs reminded me of one truth. I was still here. I was still alive. I was still worth noticing, worth loving, worth rediscovering. The sessions with Ethan continued for weeks, then months. And with each photo, I grew stronger. Not because my son had given me anything, but because his project had forced me to see myself again. It was never about him replacing what Mark had lost. It was about me realizing I had never truly lost it. The woman I thought had disappeared under the weight of chores, responsibilities, and fading love, she was always inside me. Waiting. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, I sat alone in my room surrounded by prints of myself. In one, I was laughing. In another, my gaze was steady, strong. In another, my face was turned towards sunlight, eyes closed in peace. I spread them across the bed, staring at the gallery of a woman I had nearly forgotten. Downstairs, Mark sat in his office, the glow of his computer screen spilling out into the hall. He hadn't asked what Ethan and I had been working on. He hadn't even noticed the photos scattered through the house. But for once, I didn't let his silence define me. Instead, I whispered to myself, "See you." And for the first time in years, it was enough. That was the beginning of my transformation. Slowly, I started speaking up more in my marriage. I told Mark how lonely I felt, how invisible. At first, he brushed it off, uncomfortable with the honesty. But I persisted. Some nights it ended in arguments, some nights in silence, but other nights there were glimpses of the man I used to know. I don't know if we'll ever be what we once were, but I do know this. I am not invisible anymore. Ethan's photographs were never about vanity. They were about truth. They forced me to confront not just the distance in my marriage, but the distance in myself. They taught me that even when others stop noticing you, you must not stop noticing yourself. That beauty is not in youth or perfection, but in the courage to keep living, to keep hoping, to keep rediscovering who you are. So here I am, telling you my story. A story not of scandal, not of forbidden feelings, but of a woman who almost lost herself and found her way back through the unexpected lens of a camera. And if you take anything from my words, let it be this: never let silence convince you that you have disappeared. You are still here. You are still alive. And you are still worth being seen.